There are Democrats and there are Democrats. The ones who visited President Nixon at John Connally's ranch came in limousines, air-conditioned buses, and private planes. That event, by invitation only, featured a formal dinner secluded from the press, and the president didn't make his appearance until much later. In downtown Floresville, the scene was a sharp contrast. Democratic candidate Sargent Shriver, on a makeshift platform and with a plate of frijoles, was surrounded by a cheering, happy crowd. The candidate used this counter move to hit hard at Nixon's fundraising with what Shriver calls the fat cats. Mr. Nixon didn't make a public appearance until this morning when he shook hands with the crowd at the San Antonio airport. Much of that campaigning also fell on the shoulders of Mrs. Nixon. She greeted the crowd before the president went into the terminal for a private conference with GOP leaders. Republican National Committeeman Fred Agnich discussed the president's talk.
Well, he talked about a lot of things, but the really significant thing was his very strong, ringing, and unqualified endorsement of John Tower. He made the statement and said he could be quoted that there was no senator for whom he had greater respect or whose help he needed more than John Tower, and he was just all out for him all the way.
So President Nixon now leaves San Antonio International Airport, the same spot from which Sargent Shriver left just hours earlier. The president is on his way east to Washington, Mr. Shriver on his way west to Las Vegas to continue his campaign. The closest the two men ever came to each other was 10 miles apart in Floresville last night. Bill Reynolds, Channel 8 News on the Move at San Antonio International Airport.
I know that many in the press have interpreted the dinner last evening as a gathering of the very wealthy for the purpose of getting campaign contributions. Nothing could be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, there were relatively few wealthy people there. There were a few. There were no pitch for campaign contributions whatsoever last evening, and it was simply an opportunity for him to say to people who form these state committees of Democrats for Nixon that he was grateful for their support. That's the essence of it.
It's according to whether or not, under the law regarding bribery in the state, there was an understanding between the men who contributed the $3,000 and the state treasurer who voted for the issuance of their bank charter, voted to approve their application for this bank holding company charter. If there was such an understanding, it is bribery and actionable as a crime. If there was no such understanding, it is merely a blatant conflict of interest by the treasurer.
But here you pose the possibility of bribery, and yet you have no real proof that it was bribery.
The facts that are known, the $3,000 in James' pocket and the voting by James on this bank charter application, can only be one of two things: a clear conflict of interest or the criminal act of bribery.
I have felt that I have listened to 5 messages which I want to summarize very briefly. First of all, many older persons have said to me that our society puts us in an inferior or secondary position, and we just don't like it. In the second place, many older persons have said to me that our society has been long on promises and short on delivery, and we don't like that. But the third message that I've heard from many older persons is that we want to be put in a position where we can make our own decisions regarding our own lives. We don't want other persons making those decisions for us. And the fourth message that I've heard from older persons is we want to continue to be involved in life. We don't want to be put on the shelf. The fifth message, and the one that is recurred time and time again, is above everything else, we want to be treated with dignity.
Well, I think I've established in this country that I have a love for it, and the fact that I am well known, I suppose, has some power for the Republican Party, but I went out for Mayor Yorty in our town. He's a Democrat. I went for Governor Olson when he was Democratic governor of California. I vote for the man.